Salam, peace be upon you. My name is Muhammad Layak Siddiqui, the father of Holophase. We ended part 36 with a hard, clean line. Reality may have infinite depth, but public reality, what we can measure, share, and certify, lives in finite jets, finite derivatives, finite readouts, finite claims. Now we take the next step. Because even a finite jet observation can still be non-scientific. A person can look at a meter and say, it reads 3.4. A person can watch a dial and say, it moved. A person can hear a click and say, it clicked. But if that observation cannot be reconstructed by others through shared comparison procedures, it remains private. It remains a story. It remains a report. Maybe sincere, maybe accurate, but not yet science. So part 37 installs one of the sharpest firewalls in the whole architecture. Part 37, Public Commaparator Axiom. Core claim. A statement is scientific only if others can reconstruct it through shared comparator procedures. Gauge invariant, repeatable comparison protocols. And here is the single sentence that holds it. Science is what survives reconstruction. Not what is announced, not what is believed, not what is defended. What survives reconstruction. Now let's make that feel real. The trial without witnesses. Imagine the most important trial in human history. The case is simple. What is true about the world? The courtroom is full. The stakes are everything. A civilization will be built on the verdict. The prosecution stands and says, we measured it, we observed it, we know. The judge asks, where are the witnesses? And the prosecution answers, there are no witnesses. No one in this courtroom was present when the measurement was made. No one here watched the instrument. No one here knows whether the room was quiet, whether the device was broken, whether the observer was biased, whether the result was a coincidence. All we have is a report, a piece of paper that says, this is true. Now ask yourself, with your whole soul, what kind of truth is that? It might be true, but it is not public truth. In a public trial, the evidence must be checkable. The steps must be replayable. The measurement must be reconstructable. So the judge says the only sentence that turns a report into science, show us the procedure. We will reconstruct it. That is part 37. Science is a court system for reality, built on reconstruction. What is a comparator, in the simplest words? A comparator is anything that lets two observers check whether they're seeing the same thing, without relying on personal feeling. A comparator could be a balance scale comparing two masses, a thermometer comparing your cup to a reference point, a ruler comparing your object to a standard length, a clock comparing elapsed time to a standard tick, a control group comparing outcomes to baseline, a calibration source comparing your sensor output to a known signal, a protocol comparing your procedure today to the procedure yesterday. But the deepest idea is this. A comparator is not an object, it is an operation. A comparator is a chain of steps that produces a result that others can reproduce. In science, the truth is not the number alone. The truth is the number plus the steps, plus the calibration, plus the scope, plus the uncertainty, plus the way another lab can redo it. That is why part 35 was not optional. Part 35 made claims disciplined. Part 36 made observables finite jet. Part 37 now says, a disciplined, finite observable becomes science only when it is reconstructible through shared comparators. The recipe test. Think of cooking. A bad recipe says, make it taste good. That cannot be reconstructed. A good recipe says, 250 grams flour, 3 eggs at room temperature, mix for 2 minutes, bake at 180 degrees for 25 minutes. Now anyone can try. They might get slight variation. An oven runs hot, eggs differ, but the result is recognizably the same kind of cake. Now translate that to science. A bad scientific recipe says, the electron charge is this. A good scientific recipe says, if you build this apparatus, calibrate it against these standards, control these conditions, run these steps, you will repeatedly measure a value within this uncertainty band. The key shift is this. Science is a recipe for reconstruction, not a proclamation of conclusion. The 3 levels of comparison. Now we bring a clean teaching ladder, the one you already have, because it's powerful and simple. Level 1. Private comparison. I feel warmer today. Real to you, but not science. No one else can reconstruct your internal sensation. Level 2. Arbitrary comparison. This rock is heavier than that rock. You place them on a balance, it tilts. That's already better. But if the balance is uncalibrated, if the setup changes, if the comparison depends on hidden choices, it still isn't fully scientific. Level 3. Reconstructible comparison. We compare rock A and rock B using a calibrated balance referenced to a shared standard under specified conditions with uncertainty and protocol declared. Now it becomes science. Because now the comparison becomes portable. It can travel across people, languages, and institutions. That portability is the meaning of public. The factory beneath hell. Now I return to our recurring ground, the factory, because it teaches the axiom in the clearest human terms. In the factory, a carpet was never certified by admiration. No certificate ever said, this carpet is beautiful. Beauty is private. The certificate was always comparator language. Not density measured in a sampled square. Color fastness tested with a known procedure. Symmetry checked against a pattern chart. Edge binding tested by tug strength. Dimensions measured with a standard tape. And the master weaver's magnifying glass was not only a tool, it was a comparator procedure. It defined where you look, how you look, and what counts as the same. That was part 32, the window. But part 37 goes further. Even if you have a window, even if pattern is above gamma, even if your observation is coherent, you still don't get public truth unless another weaver can walk in, use the same glass, and reconstruct what you claim. In the factory, if the inspector refused to show the glass and the method, the inspection was treated as gossip. That is science's ethic. That is science's spine. Gauge invariant without technical talk. Now, the axiom includes an important phrase, gauge invariant comparator procedures. That sounds technical, but the meaning is simple. Your result must survive changes of perspective and labeling. Here's the simplest analogy. Bad directions. Turn left at the blue house. If the house is repainted, demolished, or unknown to a stranger, the direction collapses. Better directions. Go 500 meters north, then 300 meters east. This survives paint, rumor, and personal landmarks. Gauge invariance means your comparator does not rely on private reference points. It relies on shared, stable references and procedures. In science, that means shared units or shared calibrations, shared methods, shared controls, shared reconstruction. Not because we love bureaucracy, because without it, we cannot tell whether two observers are even talking about the same thing. The calibration ladder. Now let's install a deeper image. Every scientific fact sits on a ladder. At the bottom are private sensations. I saw a needle here. I heard a click. I felt a vibration. Those are real experiences, but they are not yet public. So we climb. Rung 1. Instrument readout. The needle points to 3.4. Better, but still fragile. Because the needle could be misprinted, the device could drift, the person could misread. Rung 2. Calibration against the standard. We compared this device to a known reference and corrected its bias. Now the measurement becomes part of a shared world. Rung 3. Uncertainty plus noise plus scope. We measured 3.40 plus or minus 0.01 under these conditions with this protocol. Now the claim has discipline. It's not a boast, it's a bounded statement. Rung 4. Reconstruction by another lab. Another lab followed the same comparator chain and got the same within uncertainty. Now the claim becomes truly public. That ladder is science. And notice, every rung is comparison. A readout is a comparison between pointer and scale. Calibration is a comparison between device and standard. Uncertainty is a comparison between signal and noise. Replication is a comparison between lab and lab. So part 37 is not adding something new. It is revealing what science always secretly was. A chain of comparator operations that survives reconstruction. Why part 37 is not optional? You might ask, but if a person is honest and the observation is accurate, why do we need reconstruction? Because public knowledge is not built for one honest person. Public knowledge is built for many people, across time, across cultures, across competing interests. Science is the method that still works when we cannot assume virtue, memory, or agreement. In the courtroom of reality, sincerity is not enough. Reconstruction is the test. The core prediction. Now we place prediction at the heart, exactly as promised. Prediction. Every accepted fact reduces to chains of comparator operations. Not metaphorically, literally. If a claim is genuinely accepted as an empirical scientific fact, you can always ask, how do we know? And if you keep asking, the chain will unfold into comparator steps. Compare to a reference, calibrate to a standard, control against noise, repeat across observers. Even the most cosmic claims do this. Distance to the moon, laser bounce time compared to clock ticks. Temperature of a star, spectral lines compared to laboratory references. Age of rocks, isotope ratios compared to decay standards and calibration curves. Medicine works, outcomes compared to placebo and control groups. Whenever you push a scientific claim, it becomes a chain of comparisons. So the prediction is not science usually does this. The prediction is if it is accepted science, it must be reconstructible as a comparator chain. And if it cannot be unpacked into comparator operations, then one of two things is true. 1. It is not yet an empirical scientific fact, or 2. The comparators are hidden, and someone is withholding them. Either way, Part 37 catches it. The falsification challenge. Now we state falsification cleanly and sharply. Produce a publicly verified result that cannot be reconstructed by any shared comparator. Notice what this does. It doesn't say, find the claim people believe. It says, find the claim that is publicly verified, accepted as empirical science, yet cannot be reconstructed by any shared procedure. This is a strong demand. If you bring me a claim like, I saw something in a dream, that fails immediately because it is not publicly verified. If you bring me, trust me, I have special access, that fails because it has no shared comparator. If you bring me, it's too deep to explain, that fails because what cannot be reconstructed cannot be science by definition. So to falsify Part 37, you would have to find something astonishing. A publicly verified empirical result that no one can reproduce, no one can reconstruct, no one can access through shared procedure, yet it remains verified and accepted. That would be a new kind of knowledge. A knowledge that does not require reconstruction. A civilization would change. So Part 37 makes a real gamble. It says, there is no such thing, because public verification itself already implies comparator chains. The danger of claims without comparators. Now we become practical and ethical. A claim without comparators becomes a weapon. Because it cannot be checked, it can be used to dominate. Consider how often the world is injured by comparator-free claims. This treatment works. This policy helps everyone. This group is dangerous. This book is unquestionably true. This expert cannot be questioned. Without comparator procedures, these statements do not become knowledge. They become power. Part 37 is therefore not only a rule of science, it is an ethic of civilization. If you want public authority, you owe the public reconstruction. No reconstruction, no rightful authority. A living example, the COVID test. Let's make it living. A PCR test is not magic. It is comparator chains. The public claim is not this person has COVID as an assertion. The public claim is take a swab, extract RNA by a defined procedure, run amplification with defined primers, include positive controls and negative controls, observe amplification curve, compare cycle threshold to cutoff criteria. Every step is comparison. Sample compared to controls. Amplification curve compared to reference behavior. Cycle threshold compared to diagnostic standards. That is why different labs across different countries could agree. Not because they shared ideology, because they shared comparator chains. And that is why science can unify humans who disagree about everything else. The deeper reason, why comparison must be reconstructible. Now we connect to our foundations. Phi is the permission for distinction. But distinction only becomes public when it becomes shared comparison. And shared comparison only becomes science when it becomes reconstructible. Because the only thing we can truly share is not internal experience. What we can share is procedure. We cannot hand each other our eyes, but we can hand each other a method. So the deepest sentence of Part 37 is this. We do not share truth directly. We share the procedures for finding it. And from the survival of those procedures, across people, across time, truth emerges as the stable remainder. How science grows. Reconstruction across time. This also explains how science can outlive individuals. A scientist dies, but the comparator chain remains. A paper is published, but the real gift is not the conclusion, it is the reconstructible method. A civilization inherits not facts, but recipes for producing facts. That is why science is not mainly a library of statements. It is a library of reconstruction procedures. And that is why the best papers read like this. Here is what we did. Here is how we calibrated. Here is the noise model. Here are the controls. Here are the error bars. Here are the boundary conditions. Here is how you can redo it. The conclusion is the smallest part. The procedure is the public body. The bridge from part 36 to part 37. Now notice the precision of the architecture. Part 36 said, public observables are finite jet. Part 37 says, even finite jet observables become science only if they are reconstructible through shared comparator chains. So part 36 tells you what kind of numbers can be public. Part 37 tells you what kind of claims can be scientific. And together they block a common escape route. People love to hide in untestable spaces. They say, my claim lives at an infinite subtlety level. Part 36 blocks that. Public reality is finite derivative. They say, my claim cannot be reconstructed, but it is still true. Part 37 blocks that. Science is what survives reconstruction. These two are a double firewall. They shut the door on magical epistemology. The memory hook. Now I give you a sentence to carry like a tool in your pocket. Science is what survives reconstruction. When you hear any claim presented as public truth, ask 4 questions. 1. What is the comparator? 2. What is the standard or reference? 3. What is the procedure I can follow? 4. What would count as failure if I redo it? If those answers exist, you are in science. If those answers do not exist, you are in something else. Maybe art, maybe philosophy, maybe private experience, maybe ideology, but not empirical science. And that is not an insult. It is a classification firewall, a way to keep categories from bleeding into each other. The closing seal. We began this episode in silence. We refused to grab phi. We accepted windows. We demanded coherence above gamma. We accepted finite access. We demanded estimation discipline. We restricted public observables to finite derivatives. And now, in part 37, we place the final operational stamp on what science means. A claim is scientific only if it can be reconstructed by others through shared comparator procedures in a gauge-invariant and repeatable way. This is not a style preference. It is the very meaning of public knowledge. Because without reconstruction, there is no public. There is only private report. And if you want a civilization, if you want shared reality, you cannot build it from reports. You must build it from comparator chains. That is how strangers become colleagues. That is how enemies become co-measurers. That is how time does not erase truth. Science is what survives reconstruction. And if you want to find the formal technical works behind this philosophical architecture, you can find them on Zenodo by searching for Holophase. Now, with part 37 sealed, we are ready for the next step, because a new question rises. If science is reconstructible comparator chains, what does it mean for 2 different theories to produce exactly the same licensed outputs across all windows? If they are indistinguishable in every comparator chain, are they truly different? That is part 38. For now, carry this. Science is what survives reconstruction. Salam. Always peace be upon.